It's 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story, where we discuss the hottest topics of the day and explain why they matter. I'm Haryanto Diman, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. We begin with the government's announcement that all workers returning from China will now face new measures before they are able to return to their jobs. Details on how stricter enforcement of LOAs are still being worked out among the government agencies. Now, to recap the difference between an LOA and a quarantine order, those who are on LOA may leave home briefly to attend to matters, but they must return home as soon as possible. Whereas the person who is on quarantine is isolated and is not allowed to interact with anyone. If the person breaks quarantine, he or she will face severe penalties. Those returning from Hubei province will be quarantined. Now, moving on to our second segment, 563 people in China have died from the coronavirus after authorities confirmed a jump of 73 yesterday. It's the country's third straight record daily rise. The total number of confirmed cases in the country has surpassed 28,000. Meanwhile, in Singapore, the Health Ministry confirmed 4 more cases of the coronavirus last night. This includes the youngest patient so far, a 6-month-old baby, who is the son of an infected couple. There is also an imported case, a Chinese tourist, among the 4 new cases. The total number of confirmed cases in Singapore now stands at 28. But of the 4 new cases, 3 had contact with those in an earlier cluster linked to a group of 20 tourists from Guangxi, China. The tour group was in Singapore from January 22nd to 27th, where they visited a health products shop, Yong Tai Hang, along Cavan Road in Lavender. Let's backtrack. On Tuesday, the Health Ministry announced 6 confirmed cases. 4 of them are linked to the tour group. 2 are employees of Yong Tai Hang, cases 19 and 20. The third is the domestic helper of case 19. She is dubbed case 21. And the fourth is the tour guide of the group of 20 tourists. She is case 24. Now, on to the new cases reported last night. 3 of them had direct contact with the earlier cases. The first is the husband to the tour guide, case 24. Now he is case 25. The second case is the husband of one of the shop employees, case 19, and their 6-month-old baby boy is also infected. To tell us more about this cluster at the health products shop, I'm joined by journalist Timothy Goh. Welcome, Tim. Now, Tim, is there a possibility that the baby had contact with, say, relatives and other caregivers who aren't his parents?
Well, I mean, given that we don't have that much information at the moment, it's purely speculative, but it was Chinese New Year weekend just a couple of weeks ago, actually. So there may have been a high number of visitors coming to the household, and as we know, the incubation period for this virus is about 2 weeks' time. So if you backtrack 2 weeks from the infection date, that would put us in the middle of the Chinese New Year period.
What about daycare facilities and all that? Was the baby in daycare?
Yes, so the MOH has come out and clarified that the baby was not actually in any daycare before he was admitted to the hospital. He just stayed at home and was cared for at home.
Right. Yeah. Now, Tim, so far the more serious cases that have been reported are the elderly with an underlying illness. Now that a 6-month-old infant is one of the infected patients, parents are naturally concerned.
Of course.
Is my baby safe?
Well, I think that's a very valid concern. And to be frank, you know, infants, babies, the young are normally considered a more vulnerable population, along with the elderly and those with underlying illnesses. So they are at a high risk of infection. But that being said, you know, the fatality rate for this current illness stands at slightly below 2% right now. So I'd say, you know, concern is in a sense good, but there's no need to panic. And as a parent, the best thing you can do is to practice good hygiene for your infant as well, who may not be able to really know the concept of personal hygiene. So watch what your infant is putting into their mouth, and wash your hands before touching your infant or your infant's face.
Right, definitely hand hygiene. I think that is something that has been reiterated and emphasized a lot during this current situation, that hand hygiene is of utmost importance. Now, separately, 3 foreigners who were here last month for a conference at Grand Hyatt Singapore have been infected with the coronavirus. 2 are South Koreans who had contact with the 3rd man, who's an infected Malaysian. In an update last night, Singapore's Health Ministry said that the 3 cases are linked to a private business meeting that was held at the Hyatt from January 20th to 22nd. It was attended by 109 attendees from the same company. 94 were from overseas, who have all left Singapore. Of the 15 remaining Singapore residents, 11 are well, while 4 who have reported symptoms have been referred to the National Centre for Infectious Diseases for assessment. Grand Hyatt has since disinfected rooms and public areas. The World Health Organization is investigating this matter as well. So Tim, we don't know yet how, where, and even when the Malaysian was infected. In fact, in the latest news, the sister to this man has also been reported to be tested positive. Is that a cause of concern, seeing that for all the other cases in Singapore, we have managed to do some form of contact tracing?
Well, again, like I said, I think pretty much everyone is concerned at this point in time. There's a fine line between concern and panic, though. There is no productivity in panicking. For this particular case, even though we don't yet know how or when or where the Malaysian was infected, the good thing is that, of the 15 Singaporeans who were there, 11 of them have reported no symptoms. The 4 who did report symptoms were sent to NCID already. So as investigations are ongoing, I think they'll be able to start contact tracing if there are any confirmed cases, and then we'll be able to map it out. It's about trying to ring fence any infection clusters at the moment.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for coming onto the show, to share more light on the 4 new confirmed cases in Singapore, and at the same time also the cluster that is at Grand Hyatt Singapore. Now, for more on the coronavirus, you can head to straitstimes.com. As of Sunday, 524 people are under quarantine in Singapore. 302 are at home, while the remaining 222 are based in government quarantine facilities. These include various chalets and some university dormitories. Waking up at noon, spending your day playing computer games or watching TV, having your meals delivered. What I'm describing isn't a vacation, but rather one experience of a person under quarantine in Singapore. A 27-year-old undergraduate studying in Wuhan was evacuated last Thursday on a specially arranged flight. And since then, he's been quarantined at one of the government's designated sites. He's not allowed to leave his room except to collect his meals or throw out the trash. I'm now joined by journalist Tan May, who interviewed this student whom she referred to as Francis. Welcome, Tams.
Hi.
Now, Tami, passing the time watching TV, reading or surfing the internet, Francis' experience may sound like a holiday to some people, but could you tell us some of the restrictions he's facing?
So we know he's under quarantine, so that means it's quite strict. He has to be isolated, and I think for them there's legal repercussions if he doesn't obey the orders. But I think mostly for Francis, what he couldn't do because of the restrictions is to see his family in Singapore or to visit his mum, who we know just completed surgery. So I think that's some of the worries that he had,
And Tams, I understand that in your story, you mentioned that Francis is quarantined in a bungalow. In our heads, a bungalow, it's a huge unit, right? Is he the only one there? Do you know if he's allowed to, say, spend time in the communal spaces like the living room and kitchen?
Okay, so he's not the only one there. So I think he described maybe 4 to 5 people in each bungalow they each have their own toilets in the room. So the living room and kitchen are actually locked up, or they are out of bounds. So sometimes if they happen to meet, because there's a point where they go to collect the food, he says they're told not to interact, told not to linger around. So
So essentially it's just being in your room,
Yeah.
right, locked up in your room. And in that vein then, is his communication with the outside world, say, limited? You know, for instance, is he allowed to document his situation on social media, post on Instagram, for example?
Okay, so I mean, the good thing is that there's Wi-Fi, and he says it's not too bad. But I think there's a bit of an issue with him maybe coming up publicly to talk about it. Besides, I think they were told to be a bit careful about what they reveal about what's going on. And I think if I were Francis, I would be worried because there will be stigma. You know. Once you come out and people will be like, hey, you were the one that was in quarantine, you know, there's going to be a bit of social stigma. So that's why.
I suppose, you know, there's a lot also on him as well, if you were to reveal his identity, as it were. But I would imagine as well, being in such a situation like Francis, I mean, it's suffocating, it's claustrophobic even.
Yeah,
right?
Yes, I would think so.
Yeah, and separately as well, Tanmi, I understand that you also spoke to a Singaporean man who has lived in Wuhan for 10 years and has chosen to remain there during the outbreak. He's one of around 140 Singaporeans staying put in the Chinese city. Why have they decided to stay?
Okay, so we had a chat with him, and it's quite interesting because he said that he decided it would be safer for his family because you know, during the lockdown period, a lot of people were rushing to get out. And I think for him, especially because he has a toddler, a young son, one of the considerations was that I don't want to be stuck in an unfamiliar city under quarantine or unable to go back to Wuhan or unable to go back to Singapore. So I think that's why he decided to stay put, because nowhere safer than home if you take the proper precautions.
I suppose also if you were to come back to Singapore, there is that stigma that would follow, right? That, hey, you know, this person is from Wuhan.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, and that follows as well. Did he tell you anything about life in Wuhan at the moment?
So he did say, of course, the streets are quite deserted because people are encouraged not to go out. But he did mention that, you know, while we see so many pictures and footage of supermarkets out of stock, he said that actually that's not the truth right now. He said that some supermarkets are actually quite well stocked, and in a way he's not too worried. Yeah, so I think if you're someone who doesn't mind staying at home and are able to reassure yourself, you know, that it's okay, I'll take the necessary precaution, I think.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Tami, for sharing with us, you know, the experience of this undergraduate student who is under quarantine right now, and also on the other side where we have this Singaporean man who is in Wuhan and has decided to stay put there as well. Now, for more on Tanmi's stories, you can read them on straitstimes.com. 10 more people quarantined on a cruise ship in a Japanese port have tested positive for the coronavirus. This brings the total number of infected passengers to 20. About 3,700 people are under quarantine on the Diamond Princess ship in Yokohama, south of Tokyo, after 10 people were initially confirmed to have the virus. They have since been moved to medical facilities. The 10 new cases included 4 Japanese, 2 Americans, 2 Canadians, 1 person from New Zealand, and 1 from Taiwan. Test results for around 170 passengers are still pending. I now have David Abel, who's live with us. Now, David is a passenger who's still quarantined on the cruise ship. Hi, David.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, David. How are you coping so far there? Are you okay?
Yeah, we're the second day into quarantine and we're coping well.
Right. David, if you could tell us, you know, what were your first thoughts when your fellow passengers, you know, were first told that you had to be under quarantined? What was the situation like on the cruise ship then?
I think it was shock. None of the passengers were expecting for the whole ship to be locked down in the way it has been. All passengers confined to their cabins. You know, we had just completed a 2-week luxury cruise and everything changed overnight. Once it was announced that we had the first 10 passengers who had tested positive, we became a ship in isolation where we couldn't talk to the other passengers because we're not allowed to leave our cabins. So very, very different circumstances.
And David, how are you coping right now? I understand that you have posted some videos on your Facebook as well, and in one of it you mentioned with regard to the food and of course your health as well. Could you share with us more on that?
Yeah, the very first day of quarantine, this must have been a massive challenge to the Princess Cruise Line because they weren't expecting it, they weren't ready for it, and they have done a marvelous job. But I hadn't eaten, or none of the passengers had eaten, since the evening before. So for a diabetic who is insulin dependent to go 16, 17 hours without any food, the condition for me was getting quite serious. Um, the contact with the ship was proving very difficult, and this is where social media really came into play. They contacted the Princess Cruise Lines, many people, including reporters, and action was taken. Now, 24 hours later, the food is absolutely good. It's being served regularly. We can't choose our own food to the same extent that we did when we were on the cruise, but we're eating regular meals at regular times.
That's good to know that things are looking up, certainly, David, for you. And,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
if I may ask, how are you spending time on the cruise ship? How are you keeping your spirits up?
Well, I think it's different for me compared to all the other passengers because I'm spending a heck of a lot of time talking to journalists and talking to people back in the UK, my homeland. You know, I started the video blogs purely to bring awareness to the world and my home country of England of what was going on here. And I never expected it to become as busy as it's become global, worldwide. These little videos I've been putting up. Um, so that's been taking my time, and I'm grateful for it because it's stopping me getting bored.
Well, you know, David, what's going to happen now? Do you have any idea, you know, what's the timeline? Have the cruise ship operators kept passengers updated of the situation regularly? What's going to happen next? Do you have any idea on that?
That is the question that I'm asking, and I'm sure all the passengers are. We were told it's a 14-day quarantine. Now, 10 more passengers of you, as you have rightly said, had to leave the ship today by the Coast Guard, and they're in hospital somewhere in Japan. Uh, so does that 14 days recommence from today? Uh, what is going to happen when we are finally let off the ship and return to our home? Do we have to go into quarantine again in England? These are questions that have not been answered, and the ship is not providing any information about it.
Hmm. Well, David, thank you so much for taking time off, you know, to speak to us here in Singapore. Of course, please do take care of yourself, and certainly we hope to reconnect with you once you have safely been evacuated out of the cruise ship. Now, those
Certainly.
are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, do log on to our website, straitstimes.com. Once again, I'm Haryanto. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.